How we doing there? So thanks everybody for being patient with my kid's sickness. In fact, I got more than one sick now. Um, so I really appreciate that. And so I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. We're going to spend this little video here talking about Republic Book One, which is what we were supposed to be talking about in person yesterday. So I'm going to walk you through some of the main parts of Book One of the Republic. And then when you get back, we'll talk about Book Two on Tuesday. So we're reading these most of these books, right? We're doing a whole book in a day, which is a lot. It's a lot to read, but we have just enough time if we can do this to get our head around some of the big, really important ideas from this, amazing work. Not enough time. Not enough time. It's been a crazy semester, but some. So let's start. Let's start thinking about. Let's start looking at the Republic here. So Book One starts with Socrates walking down the street. Right? He was with Glaucon. So remember how I told you, we'll talk about this a lot, but remember how I told you that all of the people in Plato's books are real people from the time and you should think about Plato's works as sort of historical fictions, like he's recording the spirit of these people and the spirit of some of the conversations that occurred. So I guess we'll talk about today. Cephalus was a real person, and Polymarchus was a real person. And like I told you the other day, that this whole family was persecuted by the 30 tyrants. They were called the Spartan puppet government. That was set up after the end of the Peloponnesian War. Socrates was a real person, and Glaucon, who Socrates is walking with, was a real person. And in fact, Glaucon was Plato's brother. So Plato never puts himself in these books, but he puts both his brothers, Glaucon and Adeimantus, who are both figures in the Republic here, are Plato's two brothers. So Plato's brothers are here, and Socrates is here. So Glaucon and Socrates are walking down the street, and they went down to see a religious festival. And Polymarchus catches him, sees him away, and sends one of his slave boys to go get him. And ends up inviting Socrates and Glaucon back to their house, back to his house. The way the structure of, so the rest of the book really happens in conversation right here in Polymarchus's house, which, like I say, is important, given that it's a household of someone who's going to be killed by their own government. And this is a book on justice. That's this room, this house, is where the rest of the book happens. The rest of the book is a conversation in this house. And the way Book One goes is a series of 3 different answers to the main question of the Republic, right? That Socrates asks, what is justice? That's what this book is about. What is justice? And in Book One, you get 3 different characters who give 3 different answers. And you get Socrates questioning and objecting to each of those answers. So we're going to try to walk through some of that basic structure. So the first person who answers Socrates' question is Cephalus. Cephalus is Polymarchus's father. Like I say, he's an immigrant, and he's fairly wealthy, right? He made good money making his arms business. And he's retired, and he's spending a lot of his time and money making sacrifices to the gods and trying to do things to make peace before he dies. He has some interesting things to say about old age, doesn't he? He has some interesting things to say about sex in old age. He has some interesting things to say about why wealth is helpful. not for the reasons that we tend to think perhaps. So he says wealth is helpful because in old age, it gives you the ability to try to make right, to try to make amends for the people you've hurt, and for the sins you've created. Because in his religious worldview at the time, right, the way you make right with the gods is by sacrifices, and that takes money. So Cephalus comes in. So I want to just encourage you to look at the interesting things that Cephalus says about old age and sex and money and stuff. But let's cut to his answer. Socrates asks the question, what is justice? And Cephalus says, I know. Justice is telling the truth and paying off your debts. Basically, justice is giving people what they're owed. Right? That if you owe something to someone, it's just to give it back to them, and it's unjust not to. And we owe each other all the truth. Right? So justice is giving everyone what you owe them. That's it. Giving people what they're owed. So it's kind of this like transactional, right? Legalistic thought about what justice is. Justice is giving people what their due is. And what are we due people? We owe them the truth. And we owe them to give them back the things that are theirs, to pay off their debts, right? To hold up our end of any bargains we make, and so forth. So Cephalus offers this kind of very legalistic conception of justice. And it's thin, but of course, notice for a second, most of the world doesn't even live up to this, do they? Lies and deceit abound, as does not paying off your debts, as does not giving things that are due to others and trying to sneak out. So even this very thin legalistic conception of justice is something the world really has not achieved yet. But Socrates finds a problem with it, right? Doesn't he? So Cephalus says, justice is telling the truth and giving people what you owe them. And Socrates comes up with a counterexample to show that basically that definition can't be the full story of justice. And what's his counterexample? He says, well, wait a second, Cephalus, what if you borrowed a weapon from a friend who then went crazy? Should you give the weapon back to the friend? We all know the answer is no. We all know that if you borrow a weapon or a hunting rifle or whatever, you borrow something from someone like that, and in the meantime, they go through some kind of psychotic breakdown, we all know that it's wrong to give them back their weapon when they're having a psychotic breakdown. We all know that. We all know that's the right thing to do. But Cephalus's theory doesn't tell why that's the right thing to do, does it? Because Cephalus's theory says justice is giving people what you owe them. And if someone lent you something, you owe it to them to give it back when they ask for it. Or when you said you give it back, right? So Cephalus's theory says you should give the weapon back to the person because you owe it to them because it's theirs, and that was the bargain. But we all know that's wrong. We all know that if a person has a psychotic breakdown, don't give them their weapon back, right? So what does this show you? This shows you, this little counterexample shows you that Cephalus's theory can't be the full story of justice, can it? That Cephalus's theory doesn't explain something that we all know it's wrong to give the weapon back to someone who's in the middle of a psychotic breakdown. We all know that's wrong. Reckless, dangerous. We all know that. Even though the transactional thing says you have to give it back. So the whole transactional thing is not the full story of justice. It can't be. Right? Because Cephalus's theory doesn't explain something that we all deeply know. So that theory has to be incomplete. Not totally wrong, but incomplete. At that point, in the discussion, Cephalus leaves, doesn't he? He says, I'm going to go back outside and do more sacrifices, and I will bequeath the argument like all of my possessions to my son, Polymarchus. So Polymarchus takes over and offers the second theory of justice. Polymarchus says, all right, I got a better theory. He says, I think justice is helping friends and harming enemies. Justice is helping friends and harming enemies. So think about this. So what Polymarchus's theory is kind of a tribal theory of justice, isn't it? I think it's one that abounds a lot still today. That justice is, being there and helping for the people who are in the in-group and harming, or at least not giving a crap about people on the out-group, right? Helping friends and harming enemies. This is the code of tribes. This is the moral code of mafias. This is the code in some sense of like nationalism, right? Justice is helping friends and harming enemies. And I think we can all see the kind of attraction to it, isn't it, right? Like to be friends with the mafioso boss who has your back and stomps on anybody who threatens you. You can feel how that's attractive, right? This tribal conception of justice is unfortunately alive and well. And I think in part because we can kind of find it attractive. But Socrates points out some good objections to it. The first one he points out is kind of a simple objection, right? He says, well, Polymarchus, if justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies, what about when we get that mixed up? Because haven't we all been wrong sometimes about who our friends are and who our enemies are? And whenever we got mixed up who our real friend is and who our real enemy is, right? We've probably had experiences where you thought someone was your friend and they're really working against you. Or maybe you thought someone was your enemy and they're actually a great person and they're really trying to do the same kind of thing you're trying to do. So since that happens, and Polymarchus says helping your friend, that justice is helping your friend and harming your enemies, then whenever you get that mixed up, you'd be doing this exact opposite thing that Polymarchus's theory says you're supposed to be doing, right? Because when you got it mixed up, if you're trying to follow Polymarchus's theory and you're wrong about who your friend and enemies are, then you'd accidentally be helping your enemies and harming your friends, wouldn't you? So Polymarchus gets around this objection pretty easily, doesn't he? He just says, okay, Socrates, fine, I'll change my theory. Justice is helping people who you think are your friends and really are, and harming people who you think are your enemies and really are. He just adds a little condition to get around that problem, doesn't he? Which is the right thing to do, right? When you have a theory and someone gives an objection, what you're supposed to do is like change your theory so that objection doesn't fit anymore. That's how you test scientific theories. That's how you test L theories. So Polymarchus changes the theory, says, okay, my like theory 2.1 is that justice is helping your people who are really your friends and you think they are, and harming people who you think are your enemies and who really are. And then Socrates lands the much bigger objection, which is a harder one to get your head around. And this is the part where he starts talking about musicians and does the musician make things unmusical, or he talks about doctors and shepherds and ship pilots and all kinds of stuff. And you're probably wondering, like, what the heck is Socrates talking about? Well, here's his thought. So I want you to ask yourself this question. So medical errors happen, right? They happen way too much in the United States, by the way. These studies are controversial, but there's a John Hopkins study done not too long ago that suggests that medical error might be as high as the third leading cause of death in the United States. And indeed, that replicated a prior study. Numbers were different in the prior study, but not so different that it still ended up being the third leading cause of death. There's been some responses to the John Hopkins study, by the way. So it is a controversial study, but you should look it up. But I think everyone should agree that we have massive evidence to think that medical deaths caused by medical error are out of control and a massive problem in the United States. Whether they're the third leading cause of death, or the fifth, or the 10th leading cause of death, they should not be that high. So medical errors kill people way too much. Now, if that happens to you, Socrates wants to ask, what killed you? Did the art of medicine itself kill you? No, right? A doctor made a mistake. A surgeon made a mistake. A person made a mistake. And the mistake they made was some sort of lack of medical knowledge or some lack of medical skill on their part. Right? Medicine itself didn't kill you. It was actually a lack of medical knowledge or skill that killed you. That's what a mistake is. That medicine itself, in fact, couldn't kill you. Since medicine is, by definition, the science and art of preserving and furthering your well-being, right? Your life. So by definition, medicine can kill you. So a medical error is not medicine ever killing you. It's a lack of medical knowledge. It's a lack of medical skill. Similarly, if a golf teacher or any sport, right, ends up making you worse, that's not the skill of golf teaching is not what made you worse. It was a lack of skill on the part of that instructor that made you worse. So Socrates runs this with all of these kind of skills. And what he's doing here is he's thinking, all right, justice is a really hard thing to get your head around. So why don't we think about some simpler stuff? Let's think about some simple kind of human skills and activities. And if you think about these human skills and activities, whether it's, learning music or practicing medicine, right? Or, shepherding sheep or whatever, that when mistakes happen and things get hurt or made worse, it's because of a lack of the skill, not the skill itself. And then if that's right, then the same thing should apply to justice, says Socrates. That justice can't make you worse. That any action that makes a person worse would always be a lack of justice. Because what justice is, we're trying to figure out what justice is, but at least like one thing we can say for sure about what justice is supposed to be is it's supposed to be the skill of human life, right? The thing that is the right way to live, the best way to live for you and society. So if justice is defined as the skill that's the best way for you to live, for you and society, then by definition, it can't make you worse. It can't make anyone worse, just like medicine can't make people worse. It's a lack of medical skill and knowledge that hurts people. So it'd be a lack of justice that hurts people. Justice can't hurt people. Justice, by definition, is for the good of people and society. So if that's right, Polemarchus's definition is wrong, right? Because Polemarchus says justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies. But Socrates just gave you an argument that justice can't harm anyone. Justice is defined as the thing that's to everyone's benefit. So justice can't harm everyone. Think about what this means about punishment, for example. You might think, oh my gosh, does Socrates think that all punishment is unjust? That there should be no discipline at all? No. But what he thinks is that the only just discipline is discipline that's to the benefit of the person being disciplined. That all discipline has to be for improvement, for moral improvement. I mean, this is what parents think about their children. This is how parents are supposed to be disciplining their kids, right? Not to like hurt them, but to help them grow, help them become better people. And just given the very definition of justice, Socrates has a good argument that all punishment has to be like that, or all discipline has to be like that. We need to just, as a fun exercise, think about how you think that should make, if we listen to Socrates, how jails would be, how our judicial system should be, if we really deeply ran with the idea that all justice is for the benefit, that when you discipline the wrongdoer, that doesn't mean the wrongdoer is going to like it, right? Plenty of kids don't like it when you ground them or you take stuff away or you say, oh, you don't get ice cream tonight. So just because something's for your benefit doesn't mean you like it. So it's not just, you don't need to imagine a world where criminals love being in jail, but you do need to imagine a judicial system where the entire judicial system is actually designed for the benefit and improvement of everyone in it. So Socrates thinks that that just follows from the very definition of justice. Cool little argument, isn't it? But at this point, Thrasymachus, one of the more famous people in this book besides Socrates, is described as sort of what, like sitting on the side of the conversation, nearly like fomenting at the mouth, like freaking out, can't take it anymore. And he jumps into the room angry and starts yelling insults at everyone, doesn't he? Can you imagine him? Like, can you imagine that Socrates is having this conversation and everyone's talking like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, justice can't harm people. And over there in the corner, you have Thrasymachus just like freaking out. And he jumps and he screams and he's like, you simple-minded idiots. What the hell are you talking about? Are you guys that naive? Are you that dumb? You're telling me that the shepherd only practices shepherding for the benefit of the sheep? No, the shepherd is trying to make money off the sheep, sell their wool, he's trying to use them or eat them. The shepherd is only benefiting the sheep in the short run for his own benefit. And justice, says Thrasymachus, is just like that. That what justice is, says Thrasymachus, is a set of rules that have been designed by the people in power to benefit themselves and to keep the small people down. Think about it, says Thrasymachus, that we have rules against murder, rules against stealing, right? And we'll throw people in jail, and sometimes, right, the government will kill people for being convicted of murder. But the government gets to shoot missiles, launch war, kill lots of innocent people. Governments, and think about Alexander the Great, we call him, in the Hellenistic era, who basically just ran in and stole whole countries. Didn't just steal your car like a simple thief who we wave our finger at, stole entire countries, and we call him Alexander the Great, right? That our government gets to launch missiles and launch things and kill people, shoot people. They're above the rule of murder being illegal, says Thrasymachus. They're above the rule of stealing being wrong. The governments can launch wars and have for thousands of years to steal natural resources. And we just don't call it stealing, do we? Wake up, says Thrasymachus, that justice is just a system by which the people in power try to enforce rules that keep themselves in power, keep themselves on top, and keep you and I, the small people, at the bottom. In Thrasymachus's words, he writes that justice, or he says, justice is Hi, Anaya. You're welcome to be here. I'm doing the pre-recording I talked about, but you're welcome to be here if you want. Just turn off your mic so it's not picked up. Thank you. So this is a powerful idea, right? This is a powerful idea from Thrasymachus, and it's kind of this very realistic idea. You might see, or that's how Thrasymachus sees it, right? That justice is a sham. It's a whole fake set of rules that the people who are wealthy and powerful enough don't follow, but the little person has to follow. The little person gets caught. People who are wealthy enough can buy fancy lawyers and get out. People who run countries can get out of stuff, right? I mean, we have in the news, we have plenty of accusations about supposedly, right, Putin trying to kill people and off people, and where the Prince of Saudi Arabia tried to have somebody offed. And I mean, I don't think you have to be too cynical to think our own government or CIA tries to off people sometimes. Wake up, says Thrasymachus. Justice is a fake sham to keep you down, and the people at top don't have to follow it. In fact, that by you following it, you just perpetuate a system that keeps them on top and you down. The best thing for you to do, says Thrasymachus, if only you could, is to be strong enough to get above the rules. And if you think about the animal kingdom, says Thrasymachus, the strongest lion in the pride doesn't have to follow any rules. He gets to do whatever he wants. And that would be the best life, says Thrasymachus. That justice is something for us weak little people that we have to follow. It keeps us weak, it keeps us down, and that the best life to have would be one where of reckless excess, where you can do what you want, you can take what you want, you can kill whoever's in your way, you can have sex with anybody you want, you can steal whatever you want. Like the male lion who's the strongest in the pride, and takes and takes and takes and fights and kills anyone in their way. That's what the powerful do. That's the way the powerful live. That's what the best life is, says Thrasymachus. And the whole system of justice just perpetuates them being able to do it and you staying weak. It's quite a challenge. And in fact, Thrasymachus's challenge is going to stay with us for a while. At the end of book one, Socrates pushes back a couple important things that are worth thinking about and mentioning. The first one is, again, this common strategy of Socrates, where when he's thinking about something as hard and complex as justice, wants to get you to turn your attention to something simpler. He says, okay, Thrasymachus, you're telling us that the best life is excess, not following the rules, taking whatever you want and getting away with it. But then he says, wait a second, in other areas of life, Thrasymachus, is excess really good for you? Is excess eating good for you? Is excess drinking good for you? Even, I mean, excess anything. Is excess exercise good for you? No. You can eat too much, you can drink too much, you can exercise too much, you can stay in school too long, you can do anything too much, it seems. That across all these areas of life, right? As you, the adage is you can drink too much water. In fact, I've done it before. And I had my electrolytes all out of balance, and the doctors thought I was diabetic, and it turns out I was just drinking too much water. So you can do anything to excess. And so if in all these other areas of life, excess isn't good for us, Socrates argues, that's a reason to think Thrasymachus might be wrong. That maybe excess is not the way to live. That the best life isn't one of reckless excess and breaking the rules and getting away with it. He also points out to the end about how this kind of rule breaking, self excess grabbing and taking what you want, how it leads to division. It leads to internal division, and it leads to division among groups. I mean, what often happens in mafia movies or in gangs or in groups of thieves, as they say, right, is like the group can only stay cohesive as a group insofar as they obey rules of justice among themselves, and they follow a code among themselves, and they break justice with respect to others. But it doesn't last that long, does it? That by breaking justice perpetually with others, soon enough, someone in the group starts breaking justice with respect to within the band of thieves, right? Within the mafia. And you start having people turning on each other and breaking apart. That reaching for excess, reaching to dominate other people, reaching to take what you want, Socrates suggests, always leads to division among people. And in fact, he suggests it leads to division in yourself. I want you to think about this. Think about your own life and experience. Think about a time that you really regret. Think about something you've done. We all have, right? Think about something you've done that you think is wrong. Something you've done that you think is really unjust. Think about maybe the worst thing you've done in your life, whatever you think it is. And I want you to think about doing it and the aftermath of doing it, and the kind of internal psychological division you experienced. Socrates thinks when you behave wrongly, when you behave unjustly, when you reach out for excess and you take and you lie and you betray people and you steal things, that you create a kind of division in your own psyche. You start being at war with yourself. And I mean, in many ways, like the feeling of guilt is a kind of internal war, internal conflict with yourself, right? And so those are two big things that Socrates points out to think that pushing back against Thrasymachus, that maybe he's not right. We're not done at all with Thrasymachus's idea. It's too big and too powerful of an idea. But there's two ways that Socrates pushes back at the end of book one. One, that in so many areas of life, excess actually is unhealthy, not healthy. And two, that this kind of excess and taking and rule breaking just seems to lead to division, both among people and within yourself. And those are two reasons to think that maybe Thrasymachus is wrong. This isn't the best way to live. Even if he's right sociologically, even if he's right that the wealthy and powerful break the rules and get away with it, and we can't. That the biggest lion can do whatever he wants. If you're rich enough, you can hire the fancy lawyers. If you're the king or you're the dictator of the country, you can get away with it, with murder, literally, right? And the governments can. Even if he's right about all that sociologically, Socrates says, look, here's two reasons to think he's wrong, that that's the right way to live, that that's the best way to live, that's how you should live. Because excess is bad for you in so many other areas of life, and it seems to create division in yourself and in others. And no one wants that kind of psychic turmoil, that psychic conflict. So that's how book one ends, right? We went through three theories of justice, and Socrates tries to give objections to all three theories. We'll pick up with book two when you get back after Thanksgiving on Monday. And book two will start with this idea of Thrasymachus's all over again. Because as you'll see, Glaucon is not convinced. Glaucon thinks that these two reasons aren't enough, that Glaucon really hasn't disproven Thrasymachus's idea yet. So we're going to pick back up here with book two, and I will see all of you back in person after Thanksgiving. All right, take care, everybody.